I certainly have trouble with specific things. Like certain projects have given me trouble. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know if I would call that creative block. I just know that there are certain projects that that for some reason don't bear fruit. I think you get better as you progress through your career. I think you get better at generating ideas quickly. I think you get better at weeding through ideas. I think you think more automatically, or you have the problem at hand sort of running in the back of your mind. I used to find it amazing that an old CD of mine would come back the next morning after we had been working really hard and say, I just thought of something on the train. And I would sit there and just think, God, I wasn't thinking on the train. What are you doing thinking on the train? And I realize now that like your mind sort of moves more automatically and you have that problem in the back of your head. You don't have to like focus on thinking about it. Honestly, a good walk. I've got, I mean, I like books. I mean, I remember when I was first starting, an art director I used to work with would just incessantly page through communication arts, and would incessantly page through, archive, Lerger's archive, and would get a lot of inspiration from those things. Sometimes those things help, but for me, it's more about outside experiences. There's definitely some good, interesting books they're more about practice than they are about actual examples. There's a guy named Paul Arden who wrote a couple books that are excellent, that are just good in terms of making you readjust your attitude as you're sort of ideating. I think that's one of and if you get stuck, you should seek out another way of idea generation. Like if you've been thinking alone for a long time, get with your partner, sit with your partner for a while, see if that works. If you guys are both stuck, try a Dadaist game of you can find a bunch of those that are really interesting. Try cheesier brainstorming techniques or whatever. Like you can never tell what's going to happen. The thing about big idea thinking is that there are a couple issues with it. There are a couple problems with it. The first problem is that big idea, people are used to seeing a big idea in a certain way, in a certain medium. It's difficult, it's becoming less of, thank goodness, but it's difficult to get across a big idea in something other than a TV spot, for instance. That's a challenge. It's a challenge with people internally in agencies. It's a challenge with clients. It's becoming less so, thank goodness. But I think that's one thing that's challenging, is that big idea, we think mass media. We think it has to be big in order to go big, or whatever. I think that's one danger, and that actually the responsibility for that falls on the creatives and the internal team to figure out how to tell a story about something that might be big that doesn't seem big. I used 12 Force as an example before. It's just a way to utilize employees, and so that must have been a very interesting process of trying to explain that and trying to project how big that idea is. That's one problem. The other problem is that sometimes a big idea is going to be overwhelming for a client. Specifically for account people, sometimes if they're in tune with the client and then with the client, sometimes you actually have to take a big idea that is big, shrink it down into sort of bite-sized nuggets, and then not make it so overwhelming. Sometimes you go to a client, you say, oh, and we've got this, and then we're going to iterate it in in the web, and then we're going to iterate it on television, and we're going to iterate it with at least 9-month social media campaign seeded and because you're excited, you want to tell them how big the idea is, and all it does is scare the hell out of them. So sometimes I think you need to take your big idea, you sometimes need to take that big idea, squish it back down into little bits and make it digestible. Execution is everything. Execution is everything. So you come up with your idea. One thing that I will say about the big idea and the big idea thinking is that there is a danger in the big idea in the big idea thinking of what we call matching luggage. And that is that you have a big idea, whether it's a TV spot, whether it's whatever, whether it's a website, whether it's an experience, whether like with 12 Force it's a Twitter feed, and then there's the danger of, as you go to different channels, the idea doesn't adjust for the channels. So you end up with matching luggage. You end up with a bunch of stuff that, you know, you're pigeonholing the same concept into other things. I think that, you know, the idea of a grand strategic idea or campaign theme with lots of little ideas that are particular to channels, I think that that thinking is a lot more progressive and a lot more current. But I do think that every step of the way, as you get to go from conception to production, you know, you are in danger of affecting that idea in some way. You're also in the position that you can improve it, but execution definitely sells it. I think actually matching luggage is something that does actually happen via copywriting a lot of the time. You have a tagline, you have a campaign line, you have a headline. Do you choose to reuse that across different media? Do you choose to take a concept in words and take a TV concept and then put it in words in a Twitter feed or, you know, or on, you know, on the website? Or do you take the larger umbrella, whether it's a strategic umbrella or creative umbrella, and have that infuse copy in those particular areas? I think that you do the latter, and it takes some work. It takes a little bit of experience, and it takes a little bit of work to recognize when it's happening on other brands and to do it yourself, because matching luggage is nice because it's comfortable. But you got to keep your eye open for when it's happening really skillfully.